Why are the Trump-Putin talks under threat? Russian oil is burning even in Hungary. And when will the heating finally be turned on in Ukraine? We'll talk about this and more today on TSN. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already, and leave your comments during the broadcast so we know what interests you the most. Here are a few more topics we'll cover in this episode. There are fewer and fewer people, but the destruction.
They hit us with everything you can imagine. With grads, with those Shaheds, I don't even know what else. Well, thank God I made it through the night.
How the Pokrovsk community in Dnipropetrovsk region survives, where the last supermarket has already been turned into ashes by the enemy. A gas processing giant that wasn't protected even by bars. What's that? Mom.
A missile just flew over us. It seems like we're going to die soon.
How did Ukrainian drones carry out a double strike on Orenburg? And which other drones, meanwhile, attacked in the Rostov region? Novhorod-Siverskyi in the Chernihiv region came under a massive Shahed drone attack with about 20 explosions heard in the city. At this time, it is known that 4 people have been killed and 10 injured. Among them is a 10-year-old girl. She is being taken to the regional children's hospital. 1 adult is also in serious condition. And now there are 9 injured as a result of the strike on Sumy. There, a drone hit an intersection. A passenger bus and at least 5 cars were damaged. Emergency services are working under the threat of repeated strikes. In the south, the Russians dropped explosives from a drone onto a civilian car in Kherson. A man and a woman suffered blast injuries. It was also restless in the city at night. The occupiers attacked the shipyard district with Shaheds. 4 people with shrapnel wounds were taken to the hospital, and 20 residential buildings, a school and a cafe were damaged. 1 person was killed and 2 more were injured in Zaporizhzhia. Frontline settlements endured nearly 700 strikes just from drones alone. The Russians used more than 400. An elderly woman did not survive the shelling. Another woman and a 36-year-old man were injured. In Kostiantynivka, Donetsk region, the Russians attacked with guided aerial bombs, killing 1 person and damaging both an apartment building and a private house. In Kramatorsk, drones destroyed 6 homes, while in Druzhkivka, they struck a hospital and an apartment building. 11 people were injured in Kharkiv last night. The city was attacked by the Russians with glide bombs. 2 districts were hit. The invaders targeted private houses, businesses, and critical infrastructure. Yulia Boyko visited the sites of the strikes.
At night, the Russians attacked Kharkiv with 6 guided aerial bombs. Strikes were recorded in the Nemyshlyansky and Industrialny districts. In the morning, rescuers discovered 3 more impact sites. Fortunately, there were no serious injuries. In the private sector on the outskirts of the city, the guided aerial bombs damaged about a dozen residential houses. The blast wave blew out windows and damaged fences and cars. These homes were mostly inhabited by elderly people and families with children. The explosions, which went off one after another, caught people by surprise when they were already in
their comfortable and cozy sleeping arrangements, which serve as a peaceful sanctuary for slumber, allowing them to rest and rejuvenate after a long and tiring day. These personal havens provide the ultimate comfort and relaxation, where they can unwind and recharge, surrounded by soft linens and plush pillows, drifting off into a deep and restorative sleep, essential for their overall well-being. It happened. I can't even say how much time passed. I heard it 2 more times, but the sound was completely different by then. It was something quite heavy flying through the air, and the other object was much more voluminous.
Because of the explosions, 11 people suffered acute stress reactions, 8 women in labor and 3 men. 1 house was completely destroyed, and at least 14 private homes and several civilian businesses were also damaged. In addition, energy infrastructure facilities were also affected.
As for electricity, there is power, but some local power networks were destroyed. Additionally, transmission networks were damaged. Right now, everyone is working to fix everything as quickly as possible. We see that this is real terror against the civilian population of Ukraine.
Since the night, utility workers and volunteers have been working on site. They are helping people board up broken windows and cover roofs. A cold snap is expected starting tonight. Also, those whose homes cannot be quickly restored will be offered temporary housing.
Within 10 days, heating should be restored in homes across Ukraine. This was stated on air by the head of Ukrenergo, Vitaliy Zaychenko, during a TSN broadcast. Once heating is restored in every home, electricity consumption should decrease because people are currently using electric appliances, air conditioners and heaters to keep warm. Reducing the load on the power grid will greatly help our energy workers who are restoring damaged infrastructure every day. Currently, the most difficult situation with power supply is in the Chernihiv region, where, according to Zaychenko, electricity should be restored to every home today. Each of us can help speed up the process, for example, by not turning on powerful electrical appliances at the same time or during peak load periods, and, if possible, by replacing bulbs with energy-efficient ones. Meanwhile, energy workers are using every minute without air raid alerts to restore electricity to residents as quickly as possible. The Chernihiv region suffered another massive attack the day before. Chernihiv and the entire northern part of the region were completely left without power. Hundreds of thousands of people were left without electricity, heat and water. Shahed struck the energy infrastructure and a heat supply facility. Emergency crews could not work at full capacity because Russian drones were operating continuously. They were circling over the damaged sites, according to the Ministry of Energy. At the same time, critical infrastructure in the de-energized areas has been powered by alternative sources. Schools are operating remotely, and more than 200 points of invincibility have been set up in the region where people can warm up and charge their devices.
Hospitals, social institutions, and the water utility have all been switched to generators. As for water, it is mostly available. In most cities, if we're talking about apartment buildings, water reaches up to the 4th or 5th floor. If there are issues with this, water columns have been set up near the buildings. And in areas where the situation is more problematic, centralized water delivery is provided. Heating has been restored in hospitals, which, due to emergency night outages, were left without heat for a short period. Kindergartens are operating as well.
There are fewer and fewer people, but the destruction keeps increasing. The Pokrovsk community in Dnipropetrovsk region no longer counts the shellings because they practically never stop. Day and night, drones and shells fly over the village, and the day before, the occupiers destroyed the last large supermarket that was still operating to support the people. Evacuation teams take dozens of residents out of Pokrovsk every day, but hundreds still remain. Anastasia Nevirna returned from the village, which, despite everything, stubbornly tries to stand its ground.
With every visit to the Pokrovsk community, you notice more and more terrifying changes. A shattered center, damaged houses, and burned-out cars. Shops are closing en masse. Locals say that sometimes it's even impossible to buy bread here. And the empty streets are striking. It's more or less crowded only near the small shops. Locals are stocking up on food while they still can.
I came out to buy a cabbage for borscht, if there is any, and some carrots. I bought 5 loaves of bread in advance while there's still electricity. Put them in the fridge and I take them out from there.
Ms. Halina says she came shopping with her last 100 hryvnias because they can't deliver her pension due to the constant shelling. She says she barely made it through the night.
From 11 p.m. to 4 in the morning, we were shelled with everything you can imagine. With grads, with those Shaheds, I don't even know what else. Well, thank God I made it through the night.
Despite the danger, the woman isn't planning to leave for now. She feeds the abandoned neighbors' dogs and says she's already gotten used to sleeping sitting in the hallway.
It's scary, but somehow with them, you're not as afraid. And at night, I stay in the little hallway where there are 2 walls and a direct door leading outside.
He treats the locals to freshly smoked meat and earns his own bread this way. Mr. Roman, with his mobile smokehouse, has been stationed in the center of Pokrovsk for several months now. And although demand has dropped significantly, there are still regular customers. Roman has already relocated 3 times, and given the situation in Pokrovsk, he understands that soon he'll have to look for a new home for the 4th time.
Over a year ago, I first left for Dobropilya, then to Belozersk, and then here. There were 4 strikes. I'll have to move too, because I depend on the delivery of goods. And, excuse me, they're bringing less and less.
She and her husband live in a shattered house. A Russian Shahed exploded nearby.
A Shahed flew in and hit the asphalt. The windows were blown out, the gables were blown out, the doors here were blown out, the windows were blown out. This used to be a music school.
Ms. Zenaida and her husband miraculously survived that night. And they say with sadness that they're used to ruins because they've already lost their home in Hulyapol. But the worst thing was when they went back there to board up the windows and collect some belongings. A Russian shelling killed their daughter. So now they have neither the strength nor the desire to look for shelter again.
But where to? With our pensions, you understand. Where can we go with our pensions? So we will stay here. I think, God willing, our guys will drive them out. They will drive them out after all.
We filmed most of the people in this story in the center of the village, next to the supermarket that tried to keep operating until the very end. To keep working. Now these are scenes from the past because the enemy destroyed the store with a direct drone strike. Such precious food for a frontline village, charred and crushed, lies scattered on the ground.
There's trash lying everywhere. That's what it looks like. It's a house, but there are no people across the street.
So for those who still remain in Pokrovsk, a new ordeal awaits. Besides surviving drone and artillery strikes, they also have to keep warm in the cold and find food in the village. After all, the small shops here are also shutting down.
A massive attack on the Rostov region. Last night, drones in particular were buzzing over the cities of Rostov-on-Don and Bataysk. And this is not the first attack on the region, which is an important logistics and military hub for Russia. The governor of the region reported this on his Telegram channel. There are military airfields located there, including in Millerovo, oil depots, and other strategic Russian facilities. But as usual, the local authorities remain silent about any hits. They report that all targets were allegedly shot down, no casualties, but residents of the region are actively posting videos on social media showing numerous explosions, fires, destruction, and are not holding back in their comments.
What exactly is that thing? Mom?
Mom, a missile just flew over us. Looks like we're going to die soon. Guys, damn, you're not here. They should be hitting the Kremlin. You got the coordinates wrong.
The thousandth Shahed was neutralized by the Drone Systems Forces. This is a separate unit of the Ukrainian armed forces that destroys targets using robotic technology. According to estimates, their work alone has cost Russia nearly $70 million. The amount is comparable to the budget of a Hollywood movie. This is the money the Kremlin spends to terrorize, among others, civilians. The estimated cost of one Shahed is about $70,000. It is 3.5 meters long. Its flight range reaches 2,500 kilometers. This means that from Kursk, if necessary, it could reach Paris, from Krasnodar to Geneva, and from Veliki Novgorod to London. To give you an idea of the scale, 1,000 of these drones laid side by side would cover the area of Buckingham Palace, or a parking lot for 500 cars, or 2 football fields. Air defense experts have calculated that the money the Kremlin spent on these 1,000 Shaheds is equivalent to the salaries of 17,500 Russian teachers, or the construction of a modern 100-bed hospital. To earn such an amount, Moscow has to sell over 1,100,000 barrels of oil, which are produced by 600 companies. But even here, they now have problems thanks to the Ukrainians. The Orenburg gas processing plant has gone out of operation. One of the largest gas chemical complexes in the world has halted operations after drone strikes, reports Reuters. As a result of 2 drone attacks on Sunday and Monday, one of the key units at the facility, the gas fractionation unit, was damaged. Even the anti-drone cages carefully installed around the most valuable equipment did not help. The shutdown of the plant in Orenburg has had consequences beyond Russia's borders. Kazakhstan was forced to reduce oil and gas condensate production at the large Karachaganak field by 25 to 30% starting October 19th. Oil from this field is exported through the Caspian Pipeline Consortium and the Druzhba pipeline to Germany. Reuters sources indicate that there were plans to partially resume operations at the Orenburg plant as early as today. However, it is currently unknown how much time will be needed for a full repair. Martial law and general mobilization in Ukraine have been extended until February 3rd, 2026. The Verkhovna Rada supported the presidential bill, which extended the term due to the full-scale Russian aggression. The deputies also increased this year's state budget expenditures for security and defense by almost 325 billion hryvnias. 65% of this amount will go to salaries for the military and payments to the families of the fallen, while the rest will be used for the production and procurement of weapons and ammunition for the armed forces of Ukraine. The lion's share of the expenditures will be covered by international donor assistance from frozen Russian assets. And this is the first time that European partners have allowed Ukraine to use foreign financial assets specifically for the war, stated the head of the Budget Committee, Roxolana Pidlasa.
6 billion euros of direct budgetary aid can be used for defense needs. And here, credit must be given to the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Defense, who, for the first time since the start of the full-scale invasion, have received such permission from European partners. At the same time, it is our joint responsibility with the government to ensure that every service member receives their payments to their card on time.
The occupiers have advanced near 3 settlements in the Zaporizhzhia and Dnipropetrovsk regions. This was reported by DeepState analysts. This refers to the settlements of Malinivka, Poltavka and Kalinivske. The day before, the Russians also attempted several assaults. They tried to break through in the area of Shcherbaki, Nesteryanka, Robotyne, Novopokrovka and Malotokmachka. They tried using heavy equipment, tanks, IFVs and APCs. Meanwhile, light assault troops attacked on motorcycles. The enemy landed troops in the village. In Malotokmachka, our unit stopped this attack. The soldiers of the 118th Separate Mechanized Brigade and the tank battalion with T-72s managed to destroy a significant amount of enemy equipment. Such increased activity by the occupying forces in the Zaporizhzhia sector is an attempt by the enemy to divert our forces from Donbass, the military explains. But this was anticipated by the General Staff and our positions were reinforced in time. So for now, the situation in this direction is under control and not a single fortification has been lost. Overall, across the entire front line, there were more than 200 combat clashes in the past day. This was reported by the General Staff. They will strengthen Ukraine as much as they can. French President Emmanuel Macron has announced a new meeting of the coalition of willing countries with the participation of President Volodymyr Zelensky. According to the politician, the meeting will take place in London this Friday. Some participants will attend in person, while others will join remotely. The agenda is focused on how to help Ukraine. Today, EU leaders also jointly issued a statement in support of Kyiv, in which they agreed with Trump's proposal that hostilities must be stopped immediately. However, the starting point must be the current line of contact. At the same time, in the opinion of the Allies, so far only the Ukrainian side is taking peace seriously, while Russia is not. Therefore, pressure should be increased until Putin is ready to make peace, and Ukraine should be put in the strongest possible position before, during and after any ceasefire. In the document, European leaders also note that they are developing measures to use the full value of frozen assets in Russia so that Ukraine has the necessary resources. This issue will be one of the key items on the agenda of the EU summit scheduled for October 23rd to 24th. And one more country has joined the initiative to purchase American weapons for Ukraine. That country is Italy. According to Bloomberg, citing its own sources, Italy's Defense Minister Guido Crosetto announced during a meeting of NATO country officials last week that Italy is ready to join the mechanism known as PERL. This stands for the Priority Ukraine Requirements List. Although initially Rome was against participating in this program, explaining that Kyiv supposedly has other options for purchasing weapons, the change in position is partly due to concerns that Italy could be sidelined if the program becomes dominant for some allies. Overall, more than half of NATO member countries have already joined the PERL initiative. This was reported by the Secretary-General of the Alliance, Mark Rutte. However, as of September, the Allies had managed to raise only about $2 billion from 6 countries, which is significantly less than what Ukraine needs. This is especially concerning against the backdrop of intensified Russian attacks on energy and civilian infrastructure. The meeting between U.S. Secretary of State Rubio and Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov has been postponed. The conversation was supposed to take place on October 23rd. During the meeting, the officials were to discuss the details of upcoming high-level talks between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. However, as reported by the American channel CNN, the dialogue between Lavrov and Rubio has been postponed indefinitely. An anonymous source told journalists that this is due to the vastly different views on how to end the war. The most recent conversation between Rubio and Lavrov reportedly showed that the Russians have not really changed their demands and are not ready to make concessions, and therefore Rubio is unlikely to recommend moving forward toward a meeting between Trump and Putin. The Russian side, commenting on this news, stated, and I quote, "You can't postpone a meeting that hasn't even been agreed upon." Meanwhile, the American Senate has decided to postpone the introduction of sanctions against the Kremlin until after the leaders' negotiations. The second recent meeting between the American and Russian leaders is tentatively scheduled to take place in Budapest. If this happens, it will be Putin's first appearance in a country that is a member of the European Union. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, Bulgaria has stated that it is ready to provide an air corridor for the plane carrying the Russian leader should Moscow submit an official request. Meanwhile, in Poland, they do not rule out the possibility of forcibly landing Putin's plane if it heads to Hungary. This statement was made by the head of the local Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Radosław Sikorski. In an interview with a local publication, the Polish diplomat said that their court could oblige the country's government to detain a plane carrying Russian leader Putin while it is in Polish airspace in order to hand him over to the International Criminal Court. At the same time, according to Sikorski, the Kremlin dictator could still fly to Budapest for a meeting with Trump by avoiding EU airspace and traveling through Turkey, Montenegro, or Serbia. At the same time, the head of Poland's Ministry of Foreign Affairs criticized the Hungarian side's decision to host such a meeting. Sikorski stated that this fact is not just unpleasant, but also shows that Hungary positions itself not as part of the West, but as something in between the West and Russia. In addition, he reminded that Budapest is currently also aiding Russia by purchasing large volumes of oil from it, despite having the option to buy from other suppliers, while at the same time blocking support for Ukraine. A massive fire has broken out at Hungary's main oil refinery, which primarily processes Russian oil. The facility is located to the south of the capital, Budapest. Flames and smoke could be seen several kilometers from the site, but firefighters have now extinguished the blaze. There were no casualties, and local authorities assure that air quality remains within health safety limits. It is known that the fire broke out in one of the production facilities, but the exact cause is still unknown. The MOL company, which owns the oil refinery, is currently assessing the damage and considering the possibility of using Hungary's strategic reserves. Meanwhile, the country's Prime Minister, Viktor Orbán, held a separate discussion about this incident with the Minister of Internal Affairs and the management of the refinery. He assured that the supply of energy resources is secured and promised a thorough investigation into what happened. In Washington, the East Wing of the White House is being demolished, and by order of Trump, they plan to build a grand ballroom worth $250 million. Bulldozers have already been brought up to the president's residence, and work is in full swing. Donald Trump noted on his social network, Truth Social, and I quote, "Every president dreams of having a ballroom in the White House for hosting grand parties, state visits, and other events." He said that it would be a completely separate building from the White House and that the East Wing would be fully modernized, making it more beautiful than ever before. At the same time, according to Trump, not a single cent from the state budget will be spent on the construction. The building will be built with private contributions from, quote, "generous patriots, large American companies, and the U.S. president personally." In Japan, a woman was officially appointed prime minister for the first time today. The SNE was tasked with leading the government. Takaichi. She managed to officially become prime minister only after parliament agreed on a coalition. After that, 237 deputies voted for her candidacy. Takaichi is the head of the Liberal Democratic Party, but is known for her ultra-conservative views. She is a political opponent of former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and a strong admirer of Margaret Thatcher. Takaichi opposes same-sex marriage, the preservation of a woman keeping her surname after marriage, and the idea that women should be able to inherit the imperial throne. At the same time, she also enjoys riding motorcycles, playing percussion instruments, and is a huge fan of heavy metal. In international politics, she is known for her anti-China stance and support for Taiwan. It is known that by the end of this month, Takaichi will be able to meet with U.S. President Donald Trump. But now the former president of France is heading to prison. Nicolas Sarkozy today begins serving his sentence in a Paris detention center. He is to spend 5 years behind bars by court decision in the so-called Libyan case. Sarkozy accepted large sums for his election campaign from the late Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi in exchange for helping to whitewash his reputation in the West. The former French leader, upon arrival, must undergo processing. The standard procedure includes fingerprinting, photographing, assigning a number, surrendering prohibited items, and a thorough search that involves undressing. It is known that he will be in a cell by himself with the opportunity to go for a walk twice a day and visit the recreation room. But always without contact with other people. This regime was chosen for Sarkozy's safety. This morning, dozens of the politician's supporters gathered near his house, believing him to be innocent. The demonstration was organized by Sarkozy's sons. Before heading to prison, Sarkozy came out to meet the participants of the demonstration. His wife, Carla Bruni, accompanied him to the prison. Meanwhile, Sarkozy's lawyers have already prepared a petition for release to the Court of Appeal.